We are excited to have you join us for another episode of Real People, Real Hope. I'm Jill Heiser, Vice President of Mission Advancement, and I am joined today by Dave Game, President and CEO. Hi, Dave.
Hi, Jill.
And also Sean DeFore, our Chief Operating Officer. Hi, Sean.
Jill.
Should we tell everybody how you broke your headphones about 3 minutes ago and Sean had to fix them, or are we going to
You guys, it takes a village with me.
It was breathtaking, actually.
Thank you.
How well you did that.
I've never heard headphones described as a Rubik's Cube.
Well,
Right.
it got flipped around, turned around. Sean solved it in a second. It would have taken me all day. So thanks for saving me, Sean. So we have a very special guest with us today. One of our foster fathers is going to be with us, just telling us more about his story. So I am excited to introduce you to TJ Stuart. Welcome to the studio, TJ.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I always say that our foster parents are real life heroes because you guys have one of the hardest jobs in the world. And yet, for whatever reason, you make it look like it's just so darn easy. And so I just think that that's really great. And I cannot wait to hear a little bit more about your story. Dave, I know this specific episode is really important to you and you too, Sean. But I know Dave, as a foster dad, has been saying for quite some time, we got to get these dads on board here. Mm-hmm. It's just a whole different conversation about foster care and what it's like to be a parent. And it just seems like it always takes just a little bit longer to get dads on board. So, Dave, tell us a little bit about why this episode's so important to you.
Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, TJ's, as you put it, a real-life hero, sort of a rock star in our world. And so just to hear and share his story is part of why I'm so excited about it. But I think the other is it helps us sort of tell the broader story of families in foster care come in all shapes and sizes. And TJ's story is a great example of that. And you're right, I've had a heart for dads in foster care for a long time because it's a unique and very challenging role. Not that moms don't have that too, but dads come at it different, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit as we get into the story here.
Yeah, and Sean, you've been doing this work for a lot of years, and so I'm sure you've just seen a lot of different foster parents kind of come through. So when this episode airs, it's actually going to be Father's Day, that month of June that we all love. So can you just talk about our need for foster families, foster dads, foster moms, that it doesn't matter what kind of family it is. We just need people to step up and take care of kids.
Sure. And families come in all shapes and sizes. And Dave, I don't want to steal this story if you're going to share it later, but Dave talks about his daughter when she first came to live with them. And I think you sort of asked her, what sort of family would have been a perfect fit for her. And she said something like, I don't know that I would have cared what kind of family it was. It could have been, a sloth family that was raising me as long as I felt loved and safe.
That's right.
or something like that.
In fact, her quote was, 2 gorillas that kept her safe and loved would have been just fine with her. So I think Elaine and I, we cleared that bar a little bit. Maybe not all the time, but
just
a little
barely.
Bit. Yeah,
just barely.
She thinks I'm a Neanderthal at times, so that's a different conversation.
And I'm sure I hacked that story up. But what I love about that story is that there are a million different shapes and sizes of families, and there is a kid who will find that family to be a perfect match for them. So for us, the more families we can find, no matter what they look like, the better chance we have of finding the perfect family for a kid. And we have, over 13,000 kids in foster care on any given day. About 2,000 to 3,000 of them become available for adoption because they can't be reunified with their natural families. And we just have a constant lack of available foster parents to fill that need. And especially when it comes to dads, I think Dave's right. There's sort of a different role, and I'm sometimes saddened that we don't see more dads stepping up to be foster parents, and the ones that do seem to just have an amazing impact on kids that they foster, adopt, respite care for. So.
Absolutely. So TJ, I'm excited. Let's hear about this journey of yours and kind of how it all started and how you got to Wellspring. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit more about you?
Sure. So when I was thinking about it earlier today, I was thinking what really was the drive when I decided to become a foster parent. And I think growing up, I can divvy it up into my professional life, my personal life, and then my faith. I think that they all had such a huge impact on where I'm at today and why I finally chose to foster. I work in early childhood for a nonprofit program. and we see a lot of children who are foster children in our program. So that was, just a way of exposure. My family has also been involved in adoption and guardianship. So that's just, another exposure. And then really just my faith as a Christian, wanting to help and help the community, help those in need, really was a driving force. I often say that God speaks to me, but I don't listen. He doesn't speak loud enough, and then he yells. So what the jump start was, throwing around this idea of, well, if this happens, I can become a foster. If this happens, I can become a foster parent. And I was serving in my youth ministry at church, and had a friend who I had no clue fostered. And somehow it got brought up, and I said, yeah, I would like to get involved in fostering. And she said, well, I'm a foster parent. And she took the reins from there. She heard I was interested. She looked to see, she fostered through Wellspring, looked to see when the next orientation was, and said, hey, I'll go with you even. So I didn't really have any excuses to use at that point. I thought, let's see what they have to say.
Well, and it's interesting because our best recruiters are foster parents that are already serving kids, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so you've
So
experienced that firsthand.
Absolutely. So I went to orientation, and I was ready to go.
So can I ask a question on the God's call piece, turning into a scream that you talked about? I hear a lot of potential foster parents make that first contact with us because they feel like they're getting a call, but for whatever reason, the noise gets in the way and somehow that call gets drowned out. What were some of the things that got in your way when you were thinking about fostering that stopped you from taking that leap before the scream came?
Well, at first, I think some of the myths of foster care, right, are definitely hindrances to people. So thinking that I had to be, very wealthy to be able to do this, or thinking that I had to have everything set in place and all my bills, perfect, no debt, everything, all these different pieces. So that was one piece. And then being a single dad, can you foster as a single dad? And that was just, another piece. And then the mechanics of that. How do I foster as a single parent? Who's going to take care of them when I'm working? I think that those are all pieces that the enemy speaks to us to keep us from this. And then after, like I said, talking to a couple foster parents, talking to my friend, I just thought, well, let's try it and see. They're going to tell me no if I can't. So I don't have to make that decision. I'll let them. And, like I said, I went through the orientation. I started the paperwork process, and everything was so supportive the whole time that it just felt like this is exactly what I should be doing.
Wonderful.
That's great. So take us back to, you fostered several children over the years now, right? How many years have you been
So
at
I've
this now?
been fostering since 2016.
Okay. So about 3 years plus, right? So tell us a little bit about some of the kiddos. Obviously, we've got privacy and all that, but tell us a little bit about sort of who these kids are and how they've impacted you.
Yeah, so when I was at the tail end of getting my licensing done, we were actually waiting for the word back that I was open, and Wellsprings already had a placement for me. Little guy who was bounced around a couple times, and the licensing worker just kept telling me, TJ, I really feel like this will be a good fit for you. He was on the high end of my age in preteen, which was concerning to me as a first-time parent. But I got my license, he moved in, and you would have thought that he was with me from day one.
That's awesome.
We just really hit it off right away. He was a really cool kid, super polite, had really good manners, really good sense of humor. And I just thought, like, in that instant, I thought, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, because that's not typically what you hear before you're a foster family.
Right.
And you hear, all of the negative. So to see this little guy who was so happy just to be in the house and be able to decide he could have pizza today, like the little things. So he was my first child that I fostered. After about 9 months, he was reunified with his mother, and that was a really good process, working with her, working with him, working with the agency, really wrapping each other, wrapping services around them. I took a little bit of a break in between him and my next set. I actually was on a break when I took my next foster.
So can I just interrupt because there's an important question I got to have you respond to. So we hear from a lot of folks who are thinking about fostering, and oftentimes one of their big barriers is I know I'm going to be in love with these kids. I couldn't bear the thought of sending them back. So you've done that successfully. And twice now. Great. And so talk a little bit about that. You've got a different feel about that. You've experienced it.
That's actually one of my really big pet peeves as a foster parent. I couldn't do it because I get too attached. And part of the reason it bothers me is because I look at it and think, well, do you think that I don't get attached? I'm human. I have emotions, I have feelings, and I have love for the children that come into my home. But I do it because they deserve that. They deserve, to have that love and have that support and have that safe place. As far as the reunification piece, both experiences I had were very positive. I had very good relationships with the parents. The mom of my first child who I was fostering, her and I had a very good relationship, even to the point where she would tell me how she was concerned about when reunification was taking place. I just don't know if I can do it. And, being there in her corner and letting her know, like, you've got this. You've been doing visits. You've been doing this. And for that situation, I actually extended past the foster care and said, if you need respite, if you need just to call and talk, if you need, a day for him to just get away from you for a minute, you just want that break, go ahead and give me a call. So I think it's all in your approach.
Right.
And if you partner with families, then you're going to have that successful ending.
Yeah, and I appreciate that you shared that story, TJ, because I think people assume that there's this adversarial relationship between the parent that's trying to be reunified with the child and the foster parent. And in fact, when the two work together, it's magic, and it's magic for the kid, and it's magic for the child. I wanted to pick up on something you talked about a second ago, which was respite. And that you took a break between a couple of the kids, the children that you fostered. I don't think people always realize that respite is an option or taking a break is an option. Right. So talk a little bit about those two things.
After, again, going back to those attachments, after my first had left, I had just thought, let's take a break, let's cool down, let's process this. You can't help anyone if you're not helping yourself, right? So I took that time. I was still taking that time when I got a call for my next placements. I had at first thought, I'm still ready for this break. Like, I need to stay in here. But it was right around Christmas, and they had exhausted every option. So it was me or residential. So that's just not something that I was willing to, just because I wanted that break. But yeah, I've taken a break in between all my fosters, actually. And I've also steered towards the option of respite and just took placements for a couple days until they found a placement. So I think that is a big piece that people need to be aware of, that you can do some self-care.
Yeah. So you had opportunities to use respite.
Absolutely.
So you could get a temporary break and also to provide it for other families when they needed it. That's great.
Yeah. And that's just a good reminder, sort of as an aside to your story, that foster families who just do respite are also needed in the system. Right? So as folks sort of listen to this podcast in the months and years to come, if you're thinking about it, becoming a respite foster parent is a really good option. And so I don't want to take away from your story because it's so important. I want to get back to it, but I had to throw that little commercial message in there. Well,
I think it's a good one because that's a really easy way to kind of dip your toe in the pond and see if it's something that you're able to do. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's very good to point out.
So you've got a couple little guys with you right now their story's changing along with yours, as I understand. So let's hear about that.
Stories are changing a little bit. So their story is a long story, but to keep it shorter, I actually took them as respite about 1.5 years, 2 years ago.
That's a long respite. I got to tell you.
No. Took them for respite, and then they got a placement.
Okay, got it.
Right. Yeah, that would be
a really long respite. Yeah,
a little bit longer.
I just need to throw that in just in case somebody was saying, "Wait a minute."
Right. And I had them for respite for 5 days.
Okay.
Are they siblings?
They are.
Okay.
They are. Yeah. And after my last placements had left, I had taken another break and really was, again, praying, talking with my youth group, talking with my my life group at church, and I just was feeling a need that fostering, yep, I want to do that, but I also want something more permanent as well. So I started looking at fostering or adopting through foster care, and I thought, well, let me just even see if there's any children who I would remotely think would be a good placement, would be a good fit for me. So I went on the Michigan Adoption Resource Exchange, and I clicked what age groups I was looking at and whatnot, and here are these two boys that I provided respite.
And there they were, right in front of you then.
Right in front of me. So I inquired about them, went to my first meeting for like the orientation and then doing the paperwork. And as I was talking about these two boys that I was interested in, my worker said, oh, well, what are their names? So I gave them their names, and she stopped for a second. She said, what? And I said it again, and she pulled out their file. She actually didn't know that I ever had them as a placement, as for respite, and was already interested in talking to me about them. So it was, again, just I feel like God's plan for that.
There's a little affirmation for you, huh?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just for those who aren't familiar with MARE, the Michigan Adoption Resource Exchange, which you mentioned, it's sort of how our child welfare system tries to find permanent families for kids who do not have a family, either a foster family or someone else that's sort of in line interested in adopting them.
Right.
And what's really great about the way you found your two sons, soon-to-be sons, is that they're in this group that is traditionally very hard to place or find adoptive families for. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So where are you at in that process now?
So today is officially our last day of our 56th waiting period.
Okay.
Tomorrow we are going to, well, we're not going to court, the worker's going to court to file the paperwork for finalization. And then we will wait back to hear from the courts, and we will be all set with that.
Just like that, a forever family is created.
It is. It's been a long journey for the boys. It feels like a long journey for me, but they've had a long journey.
So what's been that time frame from that conversation you just related with the worker about adoption and say today?
So that was in October of 2017.
Okay.
They were placed with me in February of 2018, and we're getting ready to finish now.
Yeah. So it is a long journey.
It is, and TJ, something else that I'm really struck by is this is your first children that you're adopting, and you're adopting siblings, two kids together.
Yep.
Did that feel like a lot for you at first? Because we have such a great need for families who can adopt or foster multiple kids, and it always breaks my heart when I see siblings separated. Right. So say a little bit about how that felt, adopting siblings like that.
So the first child that I fostered was a single child. The second set that I fostered were brothers. So I'd already kind of thought, okay, well, I handled it for 9 months. I think I can handle it forever. But I really, again, I think it comes down to like just really being prayerful, and same idea. I couldn't think of having kids separated. So when I went looking, I was looking for a sibling set because I wanted to, if I knew that I could take two, I wanted to take two. If I thought I could take three, I would take three. I stuck with two.
We have more for you if you want that.
Right.
That's true.
So TJ, one of the things that we hear a lot is that foster families just add so much to a child's life, which is so true. But on the other end of that, I know that children add a lot to the people who are caring for their lives too. So what do you think the biggest lesson is that you have learned from just being a foster dad, or even just the boys that you're about to adopt now?
Well, I'm so glad that that's a question, because honestly, it makes me super uncomfortable when people or friends or family will say, "Oh, you're doing a great thing. You're such a blessing to those children," and I feel completely the opposite. Having these children come into our lives, it's such a blessing to me. They've taught me things like unconditional love. They've taught me patience. Just having a childlike sense of humor about things and being able to laugh things off. My boys, they have had a lot go on in their life, and to see how happy they are and just how well they have adjusted to now our home instead of my home. It's just amazing to see their resilience.
That's beautifully said, and I love the our home.
Yeah.
It's so clear just throughout the entire time that you've been talking that it is so much an our thing with you, and that's just I just think that's so commendable.
Well, and that's when you know that God is at work, right? Is
Absolutely.
that from the surface we say, well, these kids are being blessed by a foster dad who's going to become the dad, but you know, and we know that when God's at work, those blessings flow both ways.
Absolutely.
And it's not a zero-sum game. Somebody doesn't have to lose a blessing in order for somebody else to get a blessing.
Right.
It's going both ways. So I wanted to sort of pivot back a little bit to a comment you made earlier, and I'm going to sort of frame it around sort of the myths of foster care. All right, the myths of becoming a foster parent. You sort of touched on this. Our own experience when my wife and I decided to move into fostering, it seemed like everybody and their second cousin who knew us wanted to tell us the horror stories that, well, I had a neighbor who did that, and the child tried to burn the cat and destroy the barn, and I mean, just every horror story that they thought they had ever heard.
Yep.
And many that they hadn't, but just they were great stories anyways, right? They had to share. So, so one of the myths is these kids are really, really behavior-wise, you're just going to have your hands full, and right. So, talk a little bit about what was your experience when folks you knew started to know that you were going to foster.
Right. Well, so close family, immediate family, were all on board. They were, jumping in with me. But those friends and extended family, I got the same thing.
You got the same thing, yeah.
I got the horror stories, and I oftentimes would say, now, is this fact or is this fiction?
Yeah, right.
Which one are we going on? Because it's, like you said, a boss's second cousin's wife.
That's right.
Had a foster child that had this horrible situation. All of my foster children have been typically developing children. They have tantrums like a normal child would. They have, good days and not so good days. I think the difference is they've experienced things in their life that typical children haven't, right? So, to me, I am more flexible when I see those behavior problems because they have a reason to have some, struggles going on in their life. But for the most part, all of the children I fostered actually have had better manners than most children that I know. So I think that's one that we can quickly dispel as a myth.
Yeah.
They've been very polite, very thankful, and just very, very appreciative.
Yeah. Yeah. And right, all kids, wherever they come from in life, are going to go through challenges and behaviors, and triggers might be different, the backgrounds might be different, but they're kids. They're just kids in the end, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. While we're on the subject of myths, TJ, you talked about some of the myths that kept you from taking the plunge to getting licensed and becoming a foster parent. For all those people out there who may be listening and thinking, I've thought about this, I don't know if I'm ready, I don't know if I'm the right person, I don't know if I can do this, I have all these reasons why I think I can't. What would you say to them?
I would say it's very similar to having your first child. You're never going to be ready. If you're waiting for the perfect situation, you're going to be waiting forever. If you have a heart to care for others and to love others, to just jump in and you'll figure the rest out. Things that I couldn't figure out or things that I struggled with, I had a Wellspring agency. I had a foster care worker. I had a licensing worker. I had plenty of support that could get me through those quote-unquote difficult times, but those were few and far between. I would just say, jump in and enjoy the ride because it's an adventure. It really is.
And I would just add, and I've shared this over the years with all kinds of audiences, really for folks who have talked about it and thought about it and, just aren't there. I really ask them to do two things. One, learn about it. Get serious about getting the right information. Come to an orientation class at Wellspring. Understand it. But the other, specifically for people of faith who are being prompted sort of inside to do something, I really challenge them to pray about it for 30 days. as a couple, if that's the situation, maybe with a prayer partner, whatever that is, pray about it for 30 days and let God finish that prompt one way or the other. He wants you to know the answer.
Absolutely.
And so just be prayerful about it, learn about it, and you'll get to the end of that 30 days and you'll be somewhere different in your readiness. Or maybe not. Maybe that's the answer. But certainly, as Sean said earlier, we need foster parents. And boy, if we could open a cloning lab and get TJ cloned, the world would be a better place in a hurry.
Yeah. And I think that's great advice. And if in that 30 days you have any questions, you can always reach out to to Wellspring. We'd be happy to answer them while you reflect. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So last question, TJ, as we wrap up today. So one of the things that Sean and Dave always say, which I just so appreciate, is that one of the most important parts of becoming a foster parent is choosing the team that you're going to do that with. So there's a lot of foster care agencies out there. Why Wellspring?
So I think that part of it, I had that personal experience, maybe not my own personal experience, but I had a friend who had a very positive experience with Wellspring. That was my initial go-to. Someone, word of mouth. It was later that I realized that it was a faith-based agency, that you had a God's view on things, which for me as a Christian is hugely important because I want to know that I'm working with others of faith. And then, like I said, the orientation, I attended that. It was super relaxed. Any questions you had, nothing felt awkward. And then staying with Wellspring, just the support that I've gotten throughout my time as fostering, knowing that I can contact my licensing worker with any questions that I have, knowing that I didn't have to wait to business hours to send a text to my foster care worker if something was happening. Just the support you get, whether you have to use it or not, it's there.
Right. Well, I know all three of us are just so grateful that you would spend your evening with us. I'm sure being a dad makes you very, very busy and working full time and doing all of the amazing things that you're doing. So the fact that you would give us some of your time tonight means a lot to us. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Like I said, I'm very appreciative to have the opportunity to talk because I think that this is a very important topic.
Thank you,
Appreciate
TJ.
you very much, DJ. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, just like all of you listening, I'm just blown away by the beauty of TJ's story. Every aspect of it reminds me that this journey that we're at in life is just beautiful, and it's got a lot of twists and turns, and you never know what's going to happen. But one thing is for certain, that God is merciful and always has a plan. So we're celebrating with you today, TJ. I know that this is a big day for you, and so excited about the future of these two little boys with you. It's going to be a rich future, that's for darn sure. So if you are out there and you are thinking, hey, I could do this, if you've even thought about it for an instant, please log on to our website, wellspringfostercare.com. There's lots of resources, lots of videos, lots of statistics, just every kind of piece of information that you're looking for. And if you can't find it on there, you can live chat with us. We have experts ready and willing to just chat with you about all those questions. And I'm even sure that TJ would be willing to talk to you if you had a question, because he just seems really open to that. So sorry to put you on the spot, TJ, but
No problem.
Putting you in there.
You didn't say my phone number.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you all for listening. We are just so privileged to have you tune in every week. And thank you for listening to this episode of Real People, Real Hope. We'll be back with you soon.